Hi, welcome to another edition of Pauper to the People. This time I'm going to be doing a video series for this blue-red tempo deck. And this is the first video series that I've done for Pauper for the site, so I'm really excited to get started. We're going to start off with deck tech, and then I'm gonna get into the games and play a whole league for you, so you get to see how it performs in 5 different matches. Starting with the main board, the overall plan of the deck is to get to get ahead on board and then leverage that board position with counter spells and some removal. And we can often surprisingly go toe to toe with like the control decks and card advantage, and go toe to toe with the aggro decks as far as just like aggression and pressure. Combined with like our tempo elements. So the deck is very flexible. It really fills the shoes of the classic like aggro control deck in that it's able to serve multiple functions throughout a game depending on what you need it to do. Let's start with the threats. So one of the big cores of the deck is Fairy Miscreant Spellstar Sprite. Like Fairy Miscreant like triggers itself when you have more than one of them. The second or all the additional ones beyond the first will draw you cards, and then it feels Spellstar Sprite, which obviously just comes down, counters inexpensive spells for that the opponents are casting, things like that. I've had it counter 4-drops before, so if your opponent isn't interacting tremendously with you, or if you have a pretty solid curve of like multiple Spellstar Sprites or some of these dispels, you can build up a pretty big board presence of fairies and then counter some really significant cards. But Sprite works really well in Pauper because most of the cards that you'll want to counter are 1s and 2-drops, so it's really potent. And then going up the curve a little bit, we have Seagate Oracle, which is not that big of a body, but the 3 toughness is relevant against a lot of the aggro decks, which only have 1 or 2 power creatures. And its triggered ability is like a sleight of hand, essentially, if you're familiar with that card. But you get to look at the top 2 cards, you get whichever one you want, the other one goes away. And it provides quite a bit of card selection, it blocks, it attacks relatively well if the board's clear. It's just an all-around pretty stable sort of mid-game card. And Mulldrifter is it's a Mulldrifter. It's a great card because it has so much flexibility. You can play it on turn 3 for 3 mana, and you evoke it, and it essentially serves as a divination. Or you can play it on 5, and it's a 2/2 body plus drawing 2 cards, which is just a fantastic rate. It's like a 3-for-1 for 5 mana, but one of the cards is like a free 2/2 essentially. So it's a very valuable creature in the late game. There are a lot of decks that just can't keep up with it. So if you're able to chain 2 of them together, you can pull ahead of a lot of the more grindy decks like Mono Black Control and Kuldotha Boros and stuff. And the final threat that I kind of skipped over at first, that's really kind of the linchpin of the deck, is Ninja the Deep Hours. You'll notice that all of these other creatures have Enters the Battlefield abilities that trigger and that give us some sort of card advantage. And what Ninja the Deep Hours does is it not only lets you draw a card when it connects, which provides card advantage, it lets you reuse all of these other creatures' abilities, which is extremely useful in the late game. It just lets you snowball so hard. And then the way that we get to that sort of late game is Spellstar Sprite, of course, but also like these 6 counter spells we have, and these 8 removal spells. Oh, sorry, 8 counter spells and 8 removal spells. I missed the dispels there. The removal spells are pretty self-explanatory. Gets rid of big creatures, and this gets rid of slightly smaller creatures and can go to the face. which is often relevant when we're racing and we want to shorten our clock by a turn to get under the opponent's clock. These counterspells are quite solid. Obviously, we're playing for the classic counterspell, just stops anything, no matter what, for double blue. We're playing a mix of Deprive and Nullify. The original list I found online, and most of the lists have either Remove Solar Essence Scatter in this slot, but because we have so few non-blue sources, the only source we have that can't produce only blue is Izzet Boilerworks. I like Deprive and Nullify a bit better. Deprive is, more powerful effect, but I don't want to double up on it because we have somebody comes in to play tapped lands, and because the deck is actually surprisingly mana hungry. So I'm running one Nullify as a minor upgrade to an Essence Scatter against like certain Bogles decks, and there are one or two other decks that run auras like Mono Green Stompy runs Rancor, which can occasionally be relevant to counter. And then Dispel is just a good catch-all 1-mana instant in a format that's defined by cards like Lightning Bolt and Brainstorm and Counterspell. And then the last cards are the last cards that talked about Preordain, which are just pretty simple. Smooth out our draw, give us some selection, pretty cheap. The mana base is pretty straightforward. It's just a bunch of islands and then 12 duels. Izzet Boilerworks gets us card advantage. Swiftwater Cliffs gains us a life when it comes into play, which can be relevant, especially by like reusing it with the Boilerworks. And then Guildgate is just to round out the lands. We're not playing any non-blue sources because we have all of these double blue counterspells and all of these single blue cards that we just want to be able to cast them all relatively close to on curve. The only like real problems with the mana base is that we have more lands that come into play tapped than lands that don't. So sometimes it can be kind of slow, but we're good at playing from behind with the removal spells and cards like Miscreant, Spellstar Sprite, and Seagate Oracle, which catch us up while generating advantages. Obviously, we would prefer to play from ahead, though. And then the sideboard is pretty straightforward. Hydroblasts for red decks, Pyroblasts for blue decks, Electric Ray for decks with X1s, Echoing Rune for decks with artifacts, Relic of Virginis for graveyard decks, Stormbound Geist for decks with flyers, or Chainer's Edict decks because it has Undying. It's great at eating half of a Chainer's Edict, like attacking, and then later on eating another half of a Chainer's Edict, which gives us a big advantage on both on mana and on damage. We're not actually getting like up a card from that exchange, but we're fine with that. And like we can, if they use Chainer's Edict to like quote unquote upgrade the Stormbound Geist, and then we get like a Fairy Miscreant, a Spellstar Sprite, or a Seagate Oracle in play before they flash back the Chainer's Edict, then it's kind of a problem with them. Also, returning a Stormbound Geist that has a counter on it with Ninja powers lets us reuse it, and it gives us an additional life. All right, so that's the deck. Keep watching for the first match.